I've been getting asked a lot lately about slip stitches and how you know if you are supposed to slip a stitch knitwise or purlwise. And I can tell when I get asked questions a lot when it's time to shoot you a video, and pretty clearly it was time to shoot you a video on slipping stitches. So the first thing to understand is what is the difference between slipping a stitch knitwise and slipping a stitch purlwise. If you go to slip a stitch purlwise, you're going into the stitch as if you're going to purl it, even though my yarn is to the back of my work, and I just slip it off and onto the right hand needle. If you're going to slip a stitch knitwise, you go into a stitch as if you're going to knit it and slip it off onto the right hand needle. Just from those actions, you can see that when I slipped the stitch purlwise, I didn't change the orientation of the stitch. It just moved right over. But when I slip it knitwise, you can see that I'm twisting the stitch so that the left leg is coming to the front of the stitch. Let me show you that again. See, if I go in to slip it knitwise, I'm twisting that stitch. And if I go in to slip it purlwise, I'm just moving it over from one needle to another. So I think that pretty much probably makes sense. The rule that I use for slipping stitches is that if I'm slipping a stitch and I'm not touching it again, i.e. it's not part of a decrease, I slip it purlwise. So like at the beginning of a row, I would always slip a stitch purlwise. But if I'm slipping a stitch because it's part of a decrease, like if I'm going to slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over, so if I slip one knitwise and then I knit one and I pass the slip stitch over, then that I would do knitwise right there. All of my patterns will actually tell you how you're supposed to slip a stitch. But if a pattern doesn't tell you how to slip a stitch, then typically if the stitch is not part of a decrease, then you're going to slip it purlwise. And if it is part of a decrease, you'll slip it knitwise. If you're not sure, try the pattern each way and see which way you like better, keeping in mind that if you slip a stitch knitwise, you're tightening the stitch up a little bit because you're twisting it as you slip it over. What I did on this swatch right here is I just wanted to show you what it looks like if you have an edging that has stitches that are slipped purlwise on every row. Do you see that right there? You can see each of these stitches is slipped purlwise. There's no twist to them. When you slip the first stitch of every row, you can create a really nice tidy edge, but you're also working only one stitch at the end of every row, so it kind of pulls in your row gauge a little bit. You don't necessarily always want to do this on a pattern because sometimes you need that row gauge going all the way to the end of your fabric. On this side of my swatch, I slipped all the stitches purlwise at the beginning, but then you can see right up here at the end, I actually slipped these last two guys knitwise, which twist the stitch and tighten things up a little bit. Do you see that right there? So that's something to keep in mind, that keep making sure that if you are slipping the stitch at the beginning of a row, that you slip it purlwise and not knitwise. Feel free to leave any comments or questions on this if you've run into something and you need some more clarification. I am happy to discuss this further with you. Happy knitting!